My dad works in B2B marketing. He came by my school for career day and said he was a big ROAS man. Then he told everyone how much he loved calculating his return on ad spend. My friends still laugh at me to this day.
Not everyone gets B2B, but with LinkedIn, you'll be able to reach people who do. Get a $100 credit on your next ad campaign. Go to linkedin.com/results to claim your credit. That's linkedin.com/results. Terms and conditions apply. LinkedIn, the place to be, to be.
This episode is brought to you by Experian. Are you paying for subscriptions you don't use, but can't find the time or energy to cancel them? Experian could cancel unwanted subscriptions for you, saving you an average of $270 per year and plenty of time. Download the Experian app. Results will vary. Not all subscriptions are eligible. Savings are not guaranteed. Paid membership with connected payment account required.
This episode is brought to you by Shopify. Whether you're selling a little or a lot, Shopify helps you do your thing, however you cha-ching. From the launch your online shop stage, all the way to the we just hit 1 million orders stage. No matter what stage you're in, Shopify's there to help you grow. Sign up for a $1 per month trial period at shopify.com/special offer, all lowercase. That's shopify.com/special offer.
Hey everyone, welcome to this edition of Spin Shuffle Skip on the There Can Only Be One podcast channel, a proud member of the Pantheon Podcast Network. There are certain albums in my collection where I can sit there and say, I'm surprised the cassette is still holding up because I played the ever-loving crap out of it over and over and over again. Or if it's on CD, I'm surprised I didn't burn a hole through it with the laser because it was that damn good. So I'm going to be ridiculously biased on this episode because we're talking about the debut album from Nova Scotia's own Sandbox. And here to join me to go down this road, Lyle Robichaud is here from AM640 Toronto. Dude, how you doing?
Always doing great when I'm on one of your shows, Jason. Very excited for this one. Dig into some East Coast history.
Now, you yourself are an East Coaster. So growing up with all of this really good music coming out of the Maritimes, how much was Sandbox a part of that?
It was a lot part of it for me simply because Bubbles from the Trailer Park Boys is involved. And the Trailer Park Boys is basically the Bible for the East Coast. It's really the only major television show that's really hit it big. That's about us. That's about our part of the country. It's not really a great example of it because everybody is, of course, smoking a bunch of weed, doing crimes, and getting into hijinks. But that's kind of what the East Coast of Canada is all about a little bit. So it was really good. It was really formative for me. Obviously, a lot more great music came out of the East Coast than television shows. You have bands like April Wine, of course. We're going to get really folksy like Great Big Sea and Alan Doyle. And Sandbox is right up there. They're still held in some pretty high esteem.
Oh, I know, at least when it comes to my music collection, Sandbox is still held in very high esteem. They only actually put out 2 albums. This one and 2 years later from 1997, A Murder in the Glee Club. Both of those albums are absolutely fantastic. I remember because I was in an original band in the Ottawa area around this time. 1995 was actually when my first album came out. And it's like this album got played a ton in the car on the way to gigs and in my Walkman. Yeah, I said Walkman, the yellow one where the tape can actually play backwards. It was on regular rotation and I could not get enough of it. Yes, there were bigger bands out there. Yes, there were louder bands out there. Sandbox, for some reason, struck a chord with me, and I could not stop playing this disc.
Yeah, and it's not really hard to see why. Going back, I hadn't revisited it in a long time, and going back, it was kind of a flashback to the hockey dressing room, because that's where we did it. We didn't have the Walkmans. I'm a little bit after that, but we did have the giant CD boombox that one of us was in charge of bringing to hockey practice all the time, and this was in the regular rotation for that.
All right, so let's get into this album. The album's called Bionic. Released April 4th, 1995. The band's out of New Glasgow, Nova Scotia. The band at this point is Paul Murray, Scott McFarlane, Troy Shanks, Mike Smith, Bubbles from the Trailer Park Boys, and Jason Archibald. By the way, Paul Murray, if the last name sounds familiar, he is the nephew of legendary Canadian singer Anne Murray. There were 3 singles off of this one. Curious charted the highest, hitting number 34 on the Canadian singles charts and number 8 on the alternative charts. It was also nominated for Fave New Song at the 1995 Casby Awards, but lost to Navied by Our Lady Peace. And the band was nominated for Best New Group at the 1996 Junos, but they lost to the Philosopher Kings. And that Best New Group category was stacked that year. Aside from Sandbox and aside from the Philosopher Kings, you also had Rhymes with Orange and the Rainbow Butt Monkeys, who of course, went on to become Finger 11. I just like to say Rainbow Butt Monkeys because it is the worst/best band name in the history of ever. But yeah, 95, 96, it was a fantastic time in Canadian rock.
Yeah, and it just goes to show that I've said this actually on the air on my show a couple of times. I think Canadian music really hit its stride in the 90s. Of course, the 90s were a really experimental time for music, period. But in Canadian music, a lot of the most famous bands that we have produced came out in that decade. I don't know what it was. There was something in the water. But it just seems that kind of grungy, dirty, fuzzy sound really lent itself well to the Canadian ear.
Oh, yeah. And the fact that you still have a lot of those bands going today. I mean, the Econoline Crush is still out there and touring. The Watchmen are still kind of out there a little bit.
I just saw Watchmen not long ago, actually.
Yeah, exactly. Crash Test Dummies are still touring. The 90s produced some absolutely fantastic Canadian bands. And if you haven't had a chance to deep dive into 90s can rock, you are missing out. But here's what we're going to do with Bionic. Lyle and I are both going to pick 3 songs off of this disc: a spin, a shuffle, and a skip. The spin is one that we hold in high regard. The shuffle, you know what? If it comes on, it's a good time. And the skip is one that I'm going to qualify this for myself at least. It would only be the last song that I would put on because I freaking love this entire album. This kind of feels like the reverse of There Can Only Be One. And Lyle, you've gone down that road. You know that pain of trying to pick only one song on the disc to be the best one. I'm in the reverse category here. I was like, holy crap, I have to pick one as my skip song, but I freaking love them all.
That's kind of the way I put it too. Beside my skip, I even have written saying this is the skip off of this album. It's still a good song. It just, you have to pick a skip. So this is the skip. So really, you're listening to a good album when you can point to any of the songs and say, that's great. That's good music.
Yeah. And I will admit, I did not cheat and pick the intro as my skip, even though I thought about it.
Almost did.
I
almost did.
I'm like, that's my way out. I can do. No, I can't. But
that's a cop out. That's a cop out. You got to pick one that I would always say, I don't know if there's rules to this, but I would always say that if there's going to be a skip, if the whole album is an instrumental, you can't just pick an instrumental or an interlude or an intro or an extra or an intro to a song. It's got to be lyrics, the whole 9 yards.
There are exceptions. Recently, we did an episode on Daft Punk's history, and there were some really, really good instrumentals on there. I think, if I remember correctly, I think I picked one of them as my shuffle. So I guess it depends on the album in question.
On the artist, too,
exactly.
Because they do a lot of stuff that's just instrumental. That's also incredible.
Oh, yeah. No, you have to take each album as it comes. But this one, I personally, I consider the intro to be a part of Curious. That's how I kind of worked my way around.
Yeah,
it.
That makes sense. It's also only 20 some seconds long too. So
I don't even think it's that long.
I think it's I don't know.
It may only be 12, 15,
yeah,
12
it's 15 seconds. 15 seconds.
But still 15 seconds leading into a phenomenal album. So Lyle, your pick for your spin track off of Sandbox's debut album, Bionic.
Well, it's real easy because it's the one that comes right after the intro. It's Curious. There's a reason it charted. There's a reason it did so well. I do think it's the best song on the album. For an album that is very much all killer, no filler. This is the best. It's got a great bounce to it. It really does encapsulate that era we were just talking about. That kind of 90s fuzzy can rock. If you're looking for something to stamp, if the perfect example of that at the time, this song is the one. Curious is super fun. It's the one that when we burned the CD, once we started to get fancy with the hockey dressing room music and somebody downloaded LimeWire, if anyone remembers that out there, this was one of the ones that we had on one of the mix CDs because it was so catchy and it was such a great kind of encapsulation of that kind of sound.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I remember this video playing over and over and over again on Much Music. And this is when I would come home from work or from school, depending on what year, and literally just plunk on the couch, pop on Much Music, and watch music videos constantly because the 90s were so freaking awesome when it came to music. It's also my spin pick as well. And really, it's hard not to pick this one. Everything from the harmonies, the guitar work, the effect they put on the microphone for Paul Murray. I don't know what that effect is. It kind of feels almost like a radio tone to it.
Yeah, it almost sounds like he's speaking through an old transistor radio. That's what I said too.
But that's the thing where it's fantastic because it stood out from everything. And the fact that it wasn't just like a little just flavoring. It was the song. The song was the tonality on that microphone and actually made it stand out from everything else.
And that's, I think, how they really differentiate themselves with this album, because every song, whatever kind of gimmick it has, they lean into it hard, sometimes to the detriment, sometimes to the better. But that's what I love about this album in particular, is they do take whatever unique sound they were going for and they don't just pepper it. They fully dive in head first, full caution to the wind, and they try some experimental things. And it really works out on this song in particular. There's a reason this is their number one with a bullet.
Hey, it's Kaylee Cuoco for Priceline. Ready to go to your happy place for a happy price? Well, why didn't you say so? Just download the Priceline app right now and save up to 60% on hotels. So whether it's Cousin Kevin's Kazoo Concert in Kansas City, go Kevin, or Becky's Bachelorette Bash in Bermuda, you never have to miss a trip ever again. So download the Priceline app today. Your savings are waiting.
Go to your happy place for a happy price. Go to your happy price, Priceline.
This episode is brought to you by Shopify. Whether you're selling a little or a lot, Shopify helps you do your thing, however you cha-ching. From the launch your online shop stage, all the way to the we just hit 1 million orders stage. No matter what stage you're in, Shopify's there to help you grow. Sign up for a $1 per month trial period at shopify.com/special offer, all lowercase. That's shopify.com/special offer.
Storms are brewing. Crocs Echo Storm, that is. It's their most striking sneaker that is the perfect blend of form and function. From a sink-in soft feel to a seamless slip-on design, the Storm will help you build your streetwear style while supporting you wherever the day takes you. Plus, there are brand new colorways you won't want to miss. Shop Crocs Echo Storm on crocs.com today.
You mentioned having a little bit of an effect or some kind of style that they would carry through the whole song. My shuffle pick is a perfect example of that because I'm going with Luster.
Ooh, that's a good one.
I agonized over my shuffle pick because the spin for me was no brainer. Curious, boom, there you go, right? The shuffle, there are so many good slower tempo songs on this album. I was sitting there going, oh, maybe it's three balloons in a trapdoor. Oh, maybe it's Live. Oh, maybe it's and the moon changes. Maybe it's Weatherman. This feels like the Canadian version of August and Everything After from Counting Crows.
That's actually a really good comparison, and I'm totally hear that. As soon as you say that, it's absolutely correct.
But the thing with Luster, it's a little bit more upbeat. I will give it. This is kind of like maybe the Rain King of this album, in that the acoustic guitar lead on this is just sprinkling fairy dust through the entire song. Also, I've mentioned I'm a sucker for a pre-chorus, and this song has one of the better pre-choruses on the album. Maybe only second to End the Mood Changes. But then there's the lyrics in the chorus. And I don't normally print off the lyrics when we're dealing with spin, shuffle, skip, but it's a simple chorus when it comes to the lyrics. But we had what we owe, but we spent it all on tomorrow. We ate, we choked, but we did it without sorrow. It just feels like the kind of song you want to just get out there and freaking live. And it sounds like the kind of song that you could probably get away acoustically playing around the campfire.
Yeah, I would love to hear an MTV Unplugged of these guys.
So you heard it, guys. Bubbles, get the team back together. We need an acoustic version of Sandbox. That would be fantastic. Like an MTV Unplugged, or much if they did music, you know.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. But no, it would lend itself. I think the whole album would lend itself well. Even Curious to a degree would sound good on an acoustic guitar.
Oh, absolutely. But for you, what's your shuffle pick?
My shuffle pick is For You.
Ooh.
So the reason I picked this one is because we talked about a little earlier, leaning into a gimmick a little bit. This sounds to me like what a grungy Rolling Stones would sound like. And I kind of loved it. I loved the vocal arrangements. I loved kind of I don't want to say simplistic nature of it, but it's very more hookish. There's a hook there. It's very more like kind of geared towards radio. It's less experimental, but I kind of love that. I don't mind simplicity. My favorite band in the world is AC/DC. That tells you how much I love simplicity sometimes. And I think this one really played into it. I love the sound. A lot like Curious. It's one that I could have easily picked as my spin as well, I think, but Curious was just a little bit better.
The minute you said For You, instantly my head went, Yahoo!
Yeah, exactly.
And that's like you're right. Every song has a hook, something that anchors it. Like this isn't an album where every song sounds the same. Every song has something that's going to make you remember it by. You know, the whole 3 balloons in a trapdoor, like that is a fantastic, not necessarily a gallop, but definitely like a lilt to it, right?
Yes.
For You, it's that little vocal hook. For Luster, it's the acoustic guitar. For Curious, it's the radio tone on the vocals. For Weatherman, it's just harmonies all the way through. Like
Weatherman was almost my spin.
Yeah.
Or my shuffle, sorry. Weatherman was almost my shuffle. Very, very close.
Yeah, no, Weatherman made it really, really hard not to pick. But for some reason, I think the thing is the slower songs on this album are the wealth of it. Like the faster ones, the more up-tempo ones, and even though those are the ones that were released as singles, they're good, don't get me wrong, but the meat of this album lies in the slower stuff, the stuff with the more meat on it. It reminds me a lot, and I'm going to go back a couple of years on this one for another Canadian band. It reminds me of the Jerk album by Head, and that's, you know, Head with 2 H's off the front. That album was released in 1994, and that is a very moody album when you're listening to it. And another one of those, you know, unheralded, you know, up and coming Canadian bands that were just so good. And again, Head, phenomenal band. Jerk, ridiculously good album.
Jerk was a great album. That one was another one that I only think I've listened to Jerk once or twice. I don't think I've gone through it very much.
Yeah, there was a stretch where I played. I mean, there was a stretch where I was into moody stuff, period. And Jerk kind of fit into that because the whole album feels like almost like a concept album at times.
Yeah, it does. Very much so. That's perfect.
All right, Lyle, we come to the tough part. Normally it's, you know, there can only be one and we got to pick the one song. Now you got to pick your pass.
So it's funny because this was almost my shuffle. Everything was almost my shuffle. But for my skip, I actually went with Weatherman.
Wow.
And the reason being is because whenever I listen to it, I can't not hear a little bit of Green Day. I hear a slow Billy Joe Armstrong style kind of almost. It reminds me of Time of Your Life. It's in the same Venn diagram as Time of Your Life, if that makes any sense.
Mm-hmm.
So for that respect, I'm just like, it sounds the most like something else I've heard before. So when you're dealing with an album like this, where everything is unique, I kind of wanted to pick the one thing that didn't sound as unique as everything else. So that's why I went with Weatherman.
See, I can see that, but there's a reason why I can't put that as my pass. You know, you mentioned other songs. The minute I hear Weatherman, the first song that comes to mind for me is Nutshell from Alice in Chains off of the Jar and Flies album, which if we were ever to do an Alice in Chains, there can only be one episode. Nutshell might just be my only one. And that's over a song like Wood.
You strike me as a big Alice in Chains guy.
Maybe. I will say, like, of the big four of Seattle metal at the time, or Seattle grunge, Alice in Chains was my favorite of the big four.
That makes sense. That makes complete sense.
But if you were to listen to the MTV Unplugged of Alice in Chains and they start the whole show with Nutshell, the harmonies between Jerry Cantrell and Lane Staley are very reminiscent actually of this song.
Yeah, and that makes sense. That does make sense.
All right, so now we get to my past pick, and this was very much one of those, I'm literally picking one because I have to. I made the show, I made the rules, I have to live by them, and I promised myself not to pick the intro. So my skip, only because I have to pick one, is Collide. This was the second single off of this one, but I think of the singles and of the faster ones, this is the one that doesn't have that extra flavor to it.
And that makes sense. That does. It's not the one I figured you would pick. I honestly thought that you were going to go with Weatherman as well. So when we went into this, because I don't know, it's just the only one that doesn't strike me. But that does make sense, I guess. That wasn't one of the ones I was thinking of putting as my shuffle either. So I suppose that does fall on the lower end of the scale for me too. But again, this is difficult when you have an album like this where everything theoretically could also be your spin.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, Collide's still a good song. Don't get me wrong. I mean, it was at this point, it was kind of a toss up between this one and Flux, but Flux, I still could, find myself singing after hearing it. Collide just felt like 90s Canadian rock, and that's not a bad thing. But as far as the rest of the album goes, it's the one that doesn't stick in my head the minute I've heard it, because there are aspects to almost every other song on this disc where I'm like, it's the hook that stays with you.
That makes sense. Makes complete sense. But again, it's all killer, no filler. So there's no real wrong answer here. This is one of the easier episodes because when I listened through the album again, I was like, this is all great. So I'm not going to have to suffer like I've suffered for some of the other things you've had me consume media-wise.
I'm sorry, but not sorry.
I know you're not sorry.
But the thing is, this is one of those rare front to back albums. And really, there are no skips anywhere on this disc.
Not at all. Not at all. And that just shows you that anything Mike Smith touches turns to gold. That's what this says to me.
All right. So, Lyle, before we go, please remind our listeners what your spin, shuffle, and skip picks are from Sandbox's debut album, Bionic.
My spin is Curious. Great bounce to it. It is a perfect encapsulation of the time period and of national pride in music at the time. My shuffle is For You. Again, a nice Rolling Stone vibe without going too far into that territory. And then my skip is Weatherman because it is a little bit too close to something else. I can't not hear old Green Day with it. So that's why I went with Weatherman as my skip.
All right. My spin is Curious because that song is not just a single. It's basically an era for me. My shuffle is Luster, but the entire album could be my shuffle. And my pass is Collide only because I had to pick something because I made the show. Sometimes I hate myself, I tell you. Lyle,
you're a victim of your own rules.
Yeah, I tell you. Why do I do this to myself? I mean, I know why I do this to myself because it's fun, but why do I do this to myself?
That's what I think a lot of times about a lot of things.
Mm-hmm. Lyle, thank you so much for this. Now, please remind our listeners where they can find you out there on the interwebs.
Very happy to be the content producer for Let's Talk with Danny Stover on 640 Toronto. Find us on the Radio Player Canada app. We also exist in podcast form now. We're working on a couple of bigger things for that where we can get a little more loosey-goosey with it and talk some more less hard-hitting news, but we are most definitely just kind of taking the piss out of the day's news. If you're into that kind of stuff, tune on in Radio Player Canada, 640 Toronto.
All right. And dear listeners, you guys know the drill. If there is an album that you want us to cover on Spin, Shuffle, Skip, or an artist that you want us to cover on There Can Only Be One, hit us up on social media at OnlyOneCast or go to our website at notthatbadcast.com. And while you're there, make sure you check out our Coming Soon page because we have a bunch of episodes on our wish list. We want to hear your picks and your shout outs. We want to call out your name during the show. Until next time, he's Lyle. I'm Jay. You guys are awesome. This is Spin, Shuffle, Skip on the There Can Only Be One podcast channel, a proud member of the Pantheon Podcast Network. Take care.
The Arwen Lewis Show is brought to you by Evolve Entertainment, featured on Pantheon Podcasts. And I'm Arwen. I inhabit our blue planet, but my beliefs belong in the celestial realm. I'm the daughter of Peter Lewis, founding member of rock and roll cult icons Moby Grape, and the granddaughter of Oscar-winning actress Loretta Young, and I've been part of the creative cosmos all my life. I'm a recording artist, musician, songwriter, and producer, and I am your host for The Arwen Lewis Show. The Arwen Lewis Show features in-depth interviews with the hottest indie music artists and music royalty. Listen to me on any of your favorite digital listening platforms, particularly from my channel on Pantheon Podcasts and thearwenlewisshow.com.
Hi, this is Peter Lewis and Moby Grape. You're listening to the Arwen Lewis Show.